Now, as useful as financial ratio analysis is, there are limitations. There are limitations. And in conducting financial ratio analysis, you have to be aware of certain inherent limitations that may be encountered. I'm going to talk about the top 4. Firstly, especially when you're doing ratio analysis over a period of time, the accounting policies change. So if you're doing ratio analysis over an extended period of time during which the accounting policies have changed, you may no longer be comparing apples and apples. You may be comparing apples and pears, and in some extreme cases, you may be comparing apples and oranges because the accounting policies, the way the numbers were put together, have changed. You will also almost always have a lack of information. So the management team doesn't disclose all the information, sometimes for competition or proprietary reasons. So there'll always be questions you will have to ask where you don't have access to the information for you to interpret your ratios. You will always have a lack of information in some respects, and there's some areas you won't be able to bridge that gap. In hyperinflationary environments, like you had in Zimbabwe up till 2008, like you had in Argentina in the 1990s, like you had in Venezuela in early 2018. In hyperinflationary situations, financial ratio analysis loses its meaning. So in that environment, the value of financial ratio analysis is diminished significantly. The last point I want to emphasize is in terms of the benchmarking. Make sure when you benchmark, you compare comparable companies. The fact that companies are in the same sector, banking, retail, or whatever the case may be, does not necessarily mean you can compare them. Let me use an example. Standard Bank is in exactly the same sector as, let's say, Able, which is another bank which specializes in microloans. They're both in banking. But if you had to benchmark Standard Bank against Able, you'd get a totally incorrect and inappropriate response. So it would be much more appropriate to benchmark Standard Bank against ABSA, for instance, or First National Bank or First Rand. That would be a much better comparison. All those companies are in the banking sector, but you have to make sure it's a fair peer-to-peer comparison.